The truth of the matter is, I think that the increase in rates in the G7, G8 countries, under normal circumstances, I don't think should have had a major impact on investors' appetite for emerging market bonds. And I say that principally because I don't see their rates going from 1 to or 0.5 to 6%. Okay, it may double, become 1.5. All right, that's great, but an investor would still want to have, at least within their buckets, stable bonds or stable investments that are yielding 8, 9, 10%. All right, so that their weighted average return on the portfolio, can be can at least touch the sort of IRRs that they want to see. In terms of the agendas and the market not being involved, there is a misnomer when people hear the word capital market. When people hear the word capital market, the first thing to think about is stockbroker shares. And from that perspective, all right, if you even think about it, being a well-educated financial person yourself, what's shares got to do with developing the country? Okay, and and that's why when I talk in terms of markets, I always try to talk in terms of the financial market. In other words, the encompassing of the short, medium, and permanent capital. And I think until that sort of thought process is imbibed, to say that, okay, we need the entire market. So in other words, we've come up with all these programs. How are we going to fund it? Okay, now that's when you start thinking, okay, the financial markets. Okay, how do we fund it? Are we funding, how much of it is being funded domestically? What sort of yield curve do we need? And so on and so forth. Like I've always said, in terms of equities, it's a market that we seem to have ignored. In terms of, when I say ignored, it's revival for a long time. It's not possible. We cannot continue to ignore it. So no company can continue to sustain its growth with debt. At one time or the other, it has to deleverage, which is why from time to time, companies would have rights issues, they would do secondary offerings and whatever. You cannot continue to just borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow. It's not possible. And therefore, and the thing is, values of companies need to reflect actual values. So you cannot have a situation where a net book value of a company is 5 naira a share, but it's trading at 3 or 2, which is, we've seen a lot of that happen, right? One is that, and that is because of the lack of demand. And lack of demand, for me, is really a fallback from what happened in 2008. And if you think about it, look at all the markets. I mean, the 2008 phenomenon was a global phenomenon, all right? Hurting some more than others, but nevertheless, a global phenomenon. Most markets have recovered beyond the peak of 08, 07. What happened to us? It's a question that people seem to ask. All right? If our markets are that dynamic or whatever, however you want to play it, right? What happened to us? 07, which was the peak, I think, all right? 2017, it's 10 years. Wow. All right? So there's something fundamentally not happening. Some of us think we know what it is, but it's fundamentally something that isn't happening. And that is why you've not been able to get investors back in. People only invest in things that seem to be doing well. If something seems to be going this way, it is very difficult to get anybody to say, come put your money in there, especially when there are alternatives. you know. So, to my mind, you can understand why, in putting that whole program together, capital market shares, well, the question is, we don't need that. And I think that is where some of us as trade groups and so on and so forth need to help the government reorient itself. But also, it's not just reorient itself, even we as a market, there are certain fundamental things that are not happening in the financial markets, especially with the players, the strength of the market, the size of the market. I mean, you could take this camera and go around this whole office, all right? And I've actually asked you to do it. And ask yourself, someone has said, I'm investing heavily in trying to create a financial market institution. But the environment within which they're operating, okay, creates so many barriers that you're unable to fulfill the potential. So and I've always said something, a market is only as strong as the people that sell within the market. People always need to remember that. What is a market? It's a collection of shops, if I can use that term, shops. Now, you're only attracted to a market where you know that when time you go there, there is everything you need to get. If you go into a market, it's sparse, there's nothing. You go into a supermarket, half or 3/4 of the shelves are empty. Do you want to go there again? Thank you. But those are the... So when we talk about, but they're not looking at the capital market, or they're not looking at the financial market, look at the financial market itself and see how, see how weak it is.